Hello, my name is Alise Whiteman, and I will be doing my final project over the ABCD study. Um, and I will be discussing the issues surrounding perceived racism and discrimination among children in the US. I personally believe this is an important issue because if we study perceived racism in young children, we may be able to come up with a more effective solution to kill that kind of behavior before it can develop. And personally, discussing this topic of racism and our experiences with it throughout our childhoods during class this semester has inspired me to find an article about racism and childhood development and how they're linked, and that's why I chose to make my project about the ABCD study. My personal experience with learning about racism as a child was virtually nothing until I had access to the internet due to growing up in a predominantly white and ignorant community. So, the ABCD study stands for the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study, and this study took place in 2020. The sample size was 10,354 children aged 10 to 11, and then from that sample size, 51.1% were boys and 48.9% were girls. And then out of that sample size, 45.2% of the children were some type of racial or ethnic minority. The main goal of this study was to discuss issues surrounding perceived racism and discrimination among children in the US. And previous research about this topic shows that racism, obviously without a doubt, is detrimental to the health of kids and their families, but I think this study was needed in order to add further evidence to this topic and give possible solutions on how to stop it. This data was collected via survey through obviously the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study, as well as the American Community Survey from the US Census. And then for their findings, it was found that 4.8% of the children in this study had experienced racism or discrimination by that point. So at the age of 10 years old, they had already experienced it and understood that that's what that was. Black children made up the majority of that percentage of the 4.8 percentage at 10%, and then 12% of that racism and discrimination came from peers. However, some reported outside of that 12% that some reported racism and discrimination that came from teachers or other adults as well. And then also from this information, Black children were associated with a 8.23% higher odds of perceived racism among children with household incomes of $75,000 or higher per year. And then this study adds to what we already know by bringing more statistics to the table, as well as further evidence by asking new questions. And as far as what I took from this study, personally, I think that the evidence heavily implies that families with lower household incomes are much more likely to have children who will experience racism or discrimination. And as the study shows, it can be from early as the ages of 10. Maybe children would experience it even sooner than this, but it would be a little less likely that they fully understood what's going on. But even at the age of 10, they can understand that what they're experiencing is not right. This study helped me personally to better understand all the different areas a child can be a target of racism or discrimination. And then as far as the limitations of the study, personally, I think the study should have or could have benefited from a slightly broader age range, such as 10 to 15 or even 7 to 12, to compare and contrast among different age groups, as well as what this study compares, which is ethnic backgrounds as well as household incomes. And then this study, I think, helps us to understand more of the specifics of how certain kids experience racism and discrimination, whether that's through peers, teachers, or adults. It also helps us to better understand how certain home lives can increase the likelihood that that child will experience racism or discrimination. And then I personally think these findings help to enhance the discussions that we had throughout this semester over our own experiences with racism and how greatly they varied based on where we came from and our backgrounds. It also helps to add evidence to our discussions about the relationship between our economy and experienced racism in the US, even outside of children. And then, as far as the effect that this article and this study had on me, I think my article helped me to better understand all of the different areas a child can be a target of racism. And then I would certainly agree that this study provided more sufficient evidence to back their claims. And then, as far as my views before and after reading this, I would say my views didn't change because I already agreed with the things that the study were about. However, they did definitely strengthen my views and give me more evidence to use in the future when having discussions about this topic.